Good morning, everyone. At this time, I'll call the Crow Wing County Committee of the Whole for July 20th, 2021 to order. And our first order of business today will be an easement request by Kyle Hughes, Section 10, City of Emily. Ryan, if you'll lead us through this discussion.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Kyle Hughes owns the property labeled in the attached map.
Good morning, everyone.
Or attached maps. The first page is zoomed out to show a larger area, and the second page is zoomed in to look at the easement area. Everything in red on the map is private land, and everything with no fill is county or tax forfeited land. On the second page that's zoomed in, the snowmobile trail and the ATV trail layers are white and yellow, and you can see Kyle Hughes's property. A narrow 33-foot strip goes all the way out to Highway 6. So Kyle does have access to his property from Highway 6, but there's a wetland.
Is this one you want up?
Yeah.
Yeah, which one?
There's a wetland, that one works,
Okay.
right at the end here. And so that's one of, I guess that's Kyle's main issue. In order for him to build a new road on his property, he'd have to fill this wetland. And one of the main, to cross that, and one of the questions they ask at when he'd be seeking approval to fill that wetland is, have you exhausted all your options to avoid that? So that's why he's here today asking for permission to cross this south parcel. That's actually tax forfeited. I updated the map since this handout, but that's actually. Yep.
So, are these the applicants? No.
No.
So does he want us to, does he want to go have the easement, or does he want us to exhaust all his options so he can put his own road in?
He's open to either option. He's just open to, his main goal is to access his property, especially in the winter time. And since this is a grant and aid snowmobile trail, he's currently not allowed to plow it open, so he could only access his property by snowmobile. So that's one of the other issues with, if we grant an easement on the road, that would allow him to plow the grant and aid snowmobile trail to access his property. Whereas if the easement were denied, he could then work towards his own access and preserve that trail.
Do we know what his preference is, or?
He said he was open to either option. So if this were denied, he would pursue the wetland filling option.
Me, I'd rather have my own road, but it's just
Is there any
me.
reason he doesn't want to buy the south parcel? Can't sell it? Why not?
At Bruce Road, that gets us back to all of our tax market.
It looks like there's kind of a trail there. Is that, am I looking at that correctly now?
Yeah, it's a main road to access a bunch of tax forfeited land, and then there's a couple trails over it too. So pretty important piece, yeah.
The ATV and snowmobile trail are not on that way?
Yep, they're both on that road. They're just drawn a little incorrectly on the map, yep.
Basically, the use of that would widen. I mean, you're not going to put the ATV trail and the snowmobile trail and the driveway in the same place, right? Can't, because they got to plow it.
They would stay in the same place, yep, on the same parcel.
So does the easement then give him the legal right to plow?
Yeah.
On a grant and aid trail?
Yep.
I see, okay.
And then the snowmobiles would have to just ride on there, that's something that's plowed?
Yep, and they do that all the time when we have like timber harvest and the loggers have to plow the access to, so this would just be every year, rather than just one timber harvest every so often. But yeah, it's common for snowmobile to do that.
Sure.
So I guess I gotta have you explain it a little bit better to me. Okay, so everything in red is privately owned,
Except for this parcel is tax forfeited.
Right.
where the yellow and the white line are?
Yep, where the yellow is. The white line should be drawn a little bit to the south. The white line's a little bit
Okay.
off.
And then, okay, so then the county owns that. And then right up above, that looks like there's kind of a little sliver there, a skinny lot.
Yep.
Yep, that's where he owns, and he would, okay. And so it would be kind of almost two roads going parallel right next to each other.
Correct, yep. And I'm sure we would want to keep it to one access point, so even if he built a road on his, maybe there'd be just a corner or something that we would have to look at for an easement, but,
Ryan, are the maps that you handed out different from what I'm displaying right now?
what I handed
Do you
out,
want me to put which one?
yeah, if you could.
Do you want number 2
Yeah.
up on the projector?
Okay, so here, yeah, the second one, I can actually tell because you got the brown. That's what confused me is it's all red here.
Hey, we're gonna see if the dot cam works.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
Yep, so
All right, sorry about that.
So yeah, Kyle's essentially requesting an easement across this tax forfeited parcel here. And if that were unsuccessful, then he would just pursue his own access across his own property and pursue filling that wetland.
It seems to make sense that we would allow him to give him the easement so that he can use a road already there and not fill a wetland. Trail already exists. That would be my
The only thing
view.
is, I wonder what the snowmobile club or what they would say, that if it's a plowed road, I don't know.
If we had
I
any
wish I
contact
knew
with
what
them.
his preference
Yeah.
was.
Would he plow it all the way down, do you think, to the larger parcel?
Yes, he would be at least this whole stretch he would plow.
Okay.
Depends how far we would go with the easement, yep. But I'm sure the snowmobile club would not prefer that to be
Right.
plowed.
Correct.
So it's kind of
He'd have, it's still the wetland down here where he'd have to have that filled in anyway, wouldn't he?
no, this
road
road
there
is.
now.
Oh,
you
this
could-
road, okay.
Yep, that road's
Our
all
road.
high and dry, yep.
Yeah, but for access where the wetland is, to go north?
He would, so if he has to come across his own property, then you'd have to fill the wetland, other's he could drive on,
I think it.
he could
right
cross
here,
this
all the way
road.
down.
He'd
I
be
see.
past
Does he use that property primarily for hunting purposes?
I think so, and then he's got plans to build a house out there in the future.
But currently there's no living quarters there.
No, currently no buildings or anything. So it's really the trade-off between the wetland fill and the snowmobile trail plowing.
Is there any way to reroute the snowmobile trail?
Not anything really close to here. I'd have to look at,
Without a,
I don't think so, because this is the only tax forfeited strip that connects to Highway 6 in that area. Yeah.
and there's not enough room for both?
Not enough.
For the,
Side by
for a
side.
plowed road and a groomed snowmobile trail?
Well, we do have 33 feet here.
Yeah. How wide's the road now?
Oh, I see. So we could, there's potential there to maybe put the snowmobile trail on the south side of the road. Then you'd have to cross and head north. There's also potential to move the whole road kind of to the south, so it matches better with that parcel, but.
The only thing is, okay, so let's say he decides to build back on his property, and he's coming across the county property, and the road's in tough shape, then whose responsibility is it to put Class 5 on there? Is he gonna be, at that point, he's gonna be maintaining a county road or a county property? So I wish he was here, because, I mean, if his preference was to exhaust this and we said no, and then he could go ahead and do his road, I think he'd be way further ahead to have his own road, but because, if the general public can go down this road now and it gets in tough shape, who's going to maintain it if he's going to have his residents back there?
Yeah, it would have to be him, and that's, he would maintain it, but then that runs into an issue for him, because then he's maintaining kind of a public access, yep.
Right.
Yeah. And he'd be very happy to try either option, he said, so,
He would.
yep.
So who maintains that road now? If you have ATVs going through there, they're causing rutting and
Exactly.
issues with that road?
Yep,
Is the ATV, are we taking grant and aid dollars to maintain that?
They do if it's done by ATVs, or the snowmobile club would do maintenance if it was their issue. Otherwise, the county maintains it. Yep.
This is a tough one.
Yeah.
You don't have the snowmobile club.
So we're not taking any motions here.
Club
No.
opinion. We don't know the property owner's opinion. What I would suggest is maybe this one isn't ripe.
I think we should hold off on anything on this one, to your point, Tim, and let's get some opinions from the two clubs, and let's get Mr. Hughes, is that his name?
Kyle
And
Hughes.
frankly, if they were able to work out a solution, I'm not sure we would have a big issue with what the solution is.
Right.
As
Right.
long as we know that everybody has had an opportunity to weigh in, they're okay. I think that's what you're trying to balance here, is the competing interests and making sure that they're all okay.
Well, I just want to make sure that this is thought out, because eventually, if he does have a residence back there, and that's his driveway, it's a public driveway, and if it's okay, then who maintains it then?
Transportation easement would not obligate the underlying property owner to maintain the road.
The only thing
We
is,
would
Tim,
maintain it for our purposes
Right.
only. We go in for forestry. We go in for forestry once every 15, 20 years or.
right,
kind of-
but
It could
but
get
then
into
when it
pretty
gets-
rough shape.
It gets in very bad disrepair, and he comes to us and says, boy, there's a lot of potholes here, and this is my driveway, and you want to maintain this road? What are we going to do? So that's why I'm saying, I'm leaning towards denying it so that then he's exhausted all his options, and he can go ahead and put his own driveway in. He'd be way better served by that. Then he can maintain his own road and into the future. I don't know, that's the way I'm going to be coming down on this, and I guess I'd like to have you reach out to him and see if that would be, if he'd be okay with that.
Yep, and if it were denied, he tried to go for the wetland filling option on his own property, and that were denied, he could always come back again and
Right.
say, so.
Okay.
I think it would be important for the clubs and for Mr. Hughes to understand about the maintenance of that road and what agreement they have to have when we're taking grant and aid dollars to repair roads that the ATVs and snowmobiles mess up. By the same token, he's now going to have access, and he's going to cause some damage there too. So they'd have to have an agreement on that maintenance factor for that road. Be very important that that's clear and identified. So we'll bring this back in January.
1, 2, 3.
If you'll make contact with them and then reschedule it.
Yeah, yep, I'll reach out, we'll get some more information from the clubs, Kyle, and we can go from there. Come back to another committee of the whole?
Committee of the whole,
Okay.
perhaps next month.
Okay, yep,
All right,
sounds good,
thank you.
thank you.
All right, Master Gardeners, Ms. Gorgas and Mr. and Mrs. Lee, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you, Chairman and Board. We're here, Jennifer and I are both University of Minnesota Extension Crow Wing County Master Gardeners, and we're here to give you a bit of an update on what's been going on with the program because of the support we've received from you, as well as from the University of Minnesota and local grants that we've received from various organizations. So, as most of you know, all too well, the world changed in 2020. And historically, what the group had done out at the Northland Arboretum is teach children and adults how to garden through a program called Gardening 101. It was a basic gardening skills class. We could not do that because of COVID, because of restrictions that we had from the University of Minnesota, as well as basically everywhere. And so rather than leave the program fallow, we chose to pivot and Some of you saw it last year, but we put the gardens into a solarization program to keep weeds down at the gardens, about half or a little more than half of the gardens. And then the rest of it we put into till with a small group of master gardeners that were growing vegetables for local donation. That resulted in over 1,200 pounds of food donated to the local food shelves here in Crow Wing County. That's about 2,400 portions of vegetables for people in a time when a lot of people were hurting and where food insecurity was a major issue across the country and frankly still is to a certain extent. Then we got to this year, and guess what? The spring things were still in a little bit of chaos, as we all know. Things are still a little iffy around the country in different locations. And so we chose to do what we had done last year, but plus it. We took a small portion of that garden that we hadn't solarized last year, solarized it, and now have roughly 3/4 of the facility we have at the Northland Arboretum in Till, with about 19 of the master gardeners, which is roughly half of them, participating in one form or another in what we call the Community Giving Garden program. It's got 3 prongs to the program. The first prong is we had a small group of gardeners who started bedding plants from seed in early March and April. We had almost 300 plants that were originally started by these gardeners that were then donated to a patio garden project. The patio garden project was to plant patio gardens that could be donated to local charities and organizations, and we'll show you some photos of those organizations across the county that we did, as well as a portion of those bedding plants were given to the master gardeners to use out at the Northland Arboretum. And at this point, I'll let Jennifer talk about what happened with the bedding plant project.
Okay.
It's a button.
Oh, it's, yeah, it's not.
It's not, it's locked.
Technical difficulties here.
We have them all the time
Get
here.
towards my computer.
At your computer. So the pictures that we had,
Give it to Rosemary, she'll figure it out.
there we go.
As you noticed, I already had to have the guy up here because my computer wasn't on.
On the left-hand side, you can see one of our patio containers. And we had 3 choices. We had tomatoes, we had peppers, and we also had lettuce, which we combined with a small baggie of beans. And each one of the patio kits had a instruction on how to care for them and what uses they could do with that patio plant. To the middle, you can see our volunteer pickup from the VA. They picked up 20 different containers to distribute to the vets within the organization. And yes, Commissioner Barrows, our favorite, Kevin, was told that he had to pick up his container. So we are very proud of that. And the next is the Home Instead, who were taking it out to some of their patients that they caregive to. Next slide.
Oh, it's working now.
In the upper left-hand corner and in the middle corner is one of our master gardeners, and I had to bring that out because she is a huge Pequot Lake volunteer for the food shelf. And the one is an article that actually appeared in the Pequot Lakes food shelf of her delivering the plants that then went to their recipients. So not only are we planning to give produce, but we gave additional ways for people who didn't have the ability to grow a garden, something to grow. And then we have somebody picking up their produce, and we have Cuyuna Regional Medical Center, the senior living portion. So we're covering the area. Other areas, we covered all of your districts. We covered Garrison Lions Club. And I have to tell you, that was a fun thing to do. I got a hold of him, I was like, who can I get in that area? And I contacted the commander, I guess, and spoke with his wife, and she said, well, we're having a meeting tonight. She didn't sound extremely like she was going to be positive to accept, but she said, we'll bring it up. She called me the next day and she said, oh, they would love to do this. How many can we get? And I said, 20? She said, that would be great. When she came and picked him up, she was ecstatic. And she said, does this happen every year? And we had to say, no, this was an outcome from last year. But never fear. Who knows what next year will bring? And that's our hope, is to continue reaching out. So next slide. So our lofty goal is 2,000 pounds this year because we've added space. And that's going to be about 4,000 vegetable portions. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of food. With that food, when it's donated, we have created educational materials that accompany the donation and go to the food shelf so they can give to their recipients on how to use it. It has recipes. It has how they can grow their own, perhaps for next year. Donation locations include right now the Salvation Army, Sharing Bread Kitchen, and then the local food shelves at Pequot, Cross Lake, and Crosby. So we're very, very pleased to be able to offer this assistance to the residents of Crow Wing County. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brittany.
Yeah. I'm so happy to have Dan and Jennifer here today telling you a little bit about their brainchild, the Community Giving Project. While I have your valuable ears and eyes, I wanted to tell you a little bit about other programs that the Master Gardeners are doing. We have a lot going on countywide. We've established pollinator gardens throughout the county. A couple notable ones are at Teen Challenge. And then also we have a Master Gardener that is collaborating with other groups in Nisswa where they've established 3 different pollinator gardens. And a component to go along with the pollinator gardens that I'm really excited about that's in development is an educational signage project. We're working on getting our website to be a resource for residents to learn more about plants and their value that they can bring to the land and residents and visitors of our county. We also maintain a helpline where residents can call at any time and ask questions about yard, garden, horticulture. We have had, in the past month, we've had people call and ask what they should plant along their shoreline, when they should apply pesticides, you know, how should they water their lawn. So we're a valuable resource for Crow Wing to answer questions. We have a Master Gardener that has a weekly column in the Brainerd Dispatch, and it's one of their most popular, most visited columns, and that was increased from a monthly to a weekly due to COVID, and she's still maintaining that contribution. We're available to collaborate with any organization that reaches out. We have a great Master Gardener that works at Visit Brainerd, and she has lots of valuable connections in downtown Brainerd, so she's working with the city administrator to maintain the planters and to clean up the planters in downtown Brainerd. So we're excited about that relationship growing. We had a Master Gardener that attended a Head Start event that had contact with 100 kids. She taught them how to garden and educated them. And then we are maintaining our Speakers Bureau presentations, which are monthly with the Brainerd Public Library. And those have moved onto Zoom, and they've been very popular. We usually have between 50 and 200 people attend those educational seminars. And then we have community gardens throughout the county. One that I wanted to highlight is the Woodland Gardens, which is at the Good Samaritan Center in town. And we have a Master Gardener that does weekly educational sessions with the residents there and then maintains like 16 raised garden beds and guides them in their planting. So next slide. Thanks, Therese. So just to cap up, because of the work of the Master Gardeners, more residents are growing food locally growing pollinator-friendly gardens, and creating more resilient landscapes that help manage stormwater runoff. So, any questions from the commissioners?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd like Dan to explain solar for the other commissioners so they understand how you achieve solar, because we always think of the panels, and this is a panel, but it's of a different composite, and the temperature that.
Yeah. So I actually wrote an article that's in the Northland Arboretum Journal and is out on our website about soil solarization. But essentially what you're doing is you're taking the rays of the sun and the energy that it creates to heat the soil to a temperature that controls pests that you might have in the soil. And those pests could be anything from viruses or bacteria to nematodes or earthworms or insects or weeds if the temperature gets high enough. Think of it as almost composting the top layer of your soil by getting it warm enough that it actually has the desired effects. So out at the Northland Arboretum, where we have raised bed gardens, we put a sheet of 6mm plastic across the top and left it for a couple of months during the summer. And I went out there with a thermometer, took soil temperature readings at the top of the plastic, directly underneath the plastic, at 2, 4, and 6 inches below the surface of the plastic in these beds. And I was getting temperatures on a hot, sunny day of 150 degrees Fahrenheit. You only need about 135 for a period of time to kill almost anything in the soil. So we were doing a job of cleaning up those beds, keeping the weeds down, keeping the pests out, just using a sheet of plastic over the surface and the free energy from the sun. And that sheet of plastic was then used the following year to put underneath the walking beds where we put mulch on this year. So nothing went to waste in this process, and we just used our heads on how to do this in a economically and ecologically friendly way.
It's a phenomenal approach to, I guess, working the soil so it'll work the best for raising the plants. And one thing I want to say too is, I met Kevin. I don't know what Kevin's last name is. He's a veteran that had a plot out there when it was open to the public. And so the commissioners know Kevin, again, is a vet. This was like his baby out there. He was out there every day that I know of, pulling the weeds, very proud of the vegetables that he was growing. I now see him outside of Caribou, up on the north end of Baxter, and I always thought he liked coffee. Actually, he's there stealing Wi-Fi, but that's, well, utilizing Wi-Fi. I shouldn't say stealing it, but I see him all the time, and I go over, and he's just so happy to talk about, his experience there, and he can't wait to get back. So it has an impact on people, not just in their stomachs, but in their emotional person also. So it really has the opportunity to be a great experience for anyone. And I saw the kids that first year too when they were still out there, and the pride that they showed in their crops that they were growing. So it really is a good program, and I think we saw in 2020 where outdoor recreation and growing our own vegetables and that, gardening, getting outside became more important to people, and we hope that continues into the future. But thank you very much for what you folks are doing there. I appreciate it. I know you're inviting us to an event at 11 o'clock on, August 12th. I know I will be there. I just put it on my calendar, and I hope that the other 4 commissioners will take the opportunity to go out there and see exactly what takes place. So with that, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Lee and Brittany, for your presentation. Anything else?
Thank you for your time.
Black plastic or clear?
In the south of the United States, where the sun's rays are more direct on the soil, you use clear plastic because the sun will go through and it'll heat up the soil underneath faster, which means that it will solarize much faster and you won't have weed growth. In a northern climate like ours, because the angle of the sun is so much lower in a normal year, this might be an exception with the heat we've had, you use black plastic because it keeps the soil layered black and dark so that weeds that are sun sensitive to germination don't germinate underneath it while you are getting the temperatures underneath up to speed. So if I were you up here, if you're going to try to do this, I'd use black plastic, unless we're going to have a stretch of weather like we've been having.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Never heard of that.
Next,
Never heard
we get an update on out-of-home placements. Cara, welcome.
Morning. Today I'll be sharing a second quarter update for the out-of-home placement budget. So in your packet, you have the point-in-time report that reflects we have currently 148 kids in care. This is a slight increase from the last update. We did have a higher than average number of youth that entered care during the months of April and May. So during the second quarter, we had 21 kids enter care. That compared to first quarter, we had 36 or 38, I believe. 12 of those kids during the second quarter entered due to the parent's substance abuse. So we continue to see over 50% of our kids that enter care is due to chemical use by the parents. We had 5 kids that left care. 1 of those youth were adopted or we had a transfer of custody, and 4 were returned back to their removal home. Currently, we have 17 youth in the adoption queue. Those kids are waiting to be finalized, whether through the court system or DHS for final approval. And we continue to have 0 out-of-state placements. For corrections placements, we have 6 kids currently in out-of-home placement. That is compared to 12 during the first quarter. So the corrections team is continuing to use our Systems of Care grant, our SIBS program, keeping kids in the community and looking at least restrictive settings for those youth that enter our system due to delinquency or their behaviors. For the budget highlights, so that would be the budget worksheet. Year-to-date spending is $762,000 under budget. We are projected to be, so if spending continues to be where we're at right now, we will be under at the end of the year for $566,000. And we're projected to be over the 2020 actual costs if we remain consistent by $400,000. So we'd still be under budget. It's kind of a mouthful or contradictory in those 3 statements, but we would still be under budget at the end of 2021. I welcome any questions or thoughts.
One observation, Cara, in looking at the age brackets, year over year, the percentages stay almost the same for all the age brackets. I found that to be kind of interesting. You'd think there'd be some fluctuation there, and there's a small amount, but not very much. It just seems like year over year, the categories all maintain their same level. So does that mean they're moving through? We're getting some new ones in to replace the younger ones as they move up to the next category, and that child still needs assistance, or?
I think it's the latter, that, kids continue throughout the spectrum of their age and parents struggle throughout the different ages of kids. So kids going back or being adopted or transfer of custody, we have kids within that age group that are coming into care. What we do know is that kids in that 13 and plus, it is more difficult to find permanency homes for those children. So if we're not reunifying or doing a transfer of custody to a relative, they tend to stay in care longer once they become a guardian or under the guardianship of the state, and finding permanency home becomes more difficult. We have noticed or had trends that, and there's been additional funding and additional resources available, that we have more youth that are remaining in extended care. So once they're 18, they can choose to remain in care and continue to work with us. And we are finding that more and more youth are remaining in care and working with us. And that often does not mean that they're remaining in a family foster home or residential setting. It's more of an independent living setting. So, and we know kids that are not in the system or out of home placement, many of us that are parents, we know that once a kid turns 18, there is still a lot of supports that they need. And so we act in that capacity to support those kids as they move into young adults.
Okay, any other questions? Financially, it looks like a good report. I know there are projections at this point, but I think we'll all knock on wood and hope that it holds until the end of the year.
Yeah, thank you.
Realizing for 2022 that this is just this could be an anomaly, but it probably is not, it's probably not a trend forever.
Right,
Is somebody
yes.
trying to get in?
Yes. Can you unmute yourself, please? I'm wondering if it isn't that Kyle,
Oh,
but I don't know for sure until they tell me who it is. It's just a phone number.
okay.
And I would welcome if there's any additional information that the board would request during these quarterly updates, or if you would like to extend them out, open to any feedback that you have in regards to the quarterly out-of-home placement updates.
Okay, very good. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lewick. DNMC.
Do you want to? I don't have a copy of these, so.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
Morning.
Tammy Lewick, Adult Services Manager, here to just walk through, and Nathan Bertram is also here, Supervisor of Adult Mental Health, Substance Use Disorder, and Adult Protection. And he can interject at any time during this as well, but he'll be talking about our protective sheltering here in a little bit. So good morning. I just did up kind of what we've been presenting to you each quarter. Our state facility cost, just kind of a reminder that this does cover these 4 different areas. So cost of care for those that are at Anoka Regional Treatment Center, after 30 days, we pay 20% of their daily rate. Those under commitment that no longer meet medical criteria in either the AMRTC or the CBHH, those are considered DNM, we refer to it as DNMC. Mentally ill and dangerous, MIND, and then the sexually dangerous. The current daily rate at Anoka is $1,396, and at the CBHH, $1,524. Last year, we did not see a change during the legislative time. This year, we do have a change that will occur on August 1st. So the AMRTC will be going up to $1,615, and the CBHH will be at $1,644. We are responsible for 100% of the daily cost when an individual no longer meets medical criteria in that inpatient hospital setting. That's both at the AMRTC and the CBHH. So far this year, in 2021, we've had 3 individuals who did not meet medical criteria for their hospital level of care. We've been able to keep the days at 9 days. We attribute that to two primary things. One, our regional transition specialists that we partner with counties in our region to have this regional transition specialist that's paid through our adult mental health initiative. And then Nathan and his team have been doing a weekly commitment meeting where they review anyone that we have under commitment or on a stay out in the community, and really just try to stay on top of these cases, and when people are getting ready for, well, I shouldn't even say at the very beginning when they enter, just making sure that we're thinking about discharge. And Mike Willie from Sourcewell also attends that weekly commitment meeting. We currently have one I think you remember a few years ago, the state did allow for counties to basically ask for a review when we felt that the discharge was held up due to something on the state side. There's about 4 different reasons we can ask for that review. So we do currently have one pending review with the state for an individual who was at the Anoka. We felt that the discharge plan was in place, and we feel that the state prolonged the discharge, primarily, I think, due to some confusion that they thought there was a court proceedings in place, and it led to that. That review has probably been in for over 30 days, and we have not heard, but that will be 7 days of does not meet criteria, and at a cost of $9,772. We'll see what they decide. We usually have to make our reasons, our arguments for that, and it did take some time because their social worker, I think it was like, went over a weekend, social worker was out, came back, and then needed to kind of work through what her confusion, or what the confusion was, I guess. So we hope to hear on that soon. Our annual budget for this entire area is $687,000. So in these charts, on the first page, on the first slide, I had just to date, we are at $288,731. You can see cost of care, we're at $12,842. Sexually dangerous is a little ahead of last year at this time. So the comparison down below, that's for the whole year, is what you're seeing there for 2020, not year to date. And then 2021 is through Q2. So we're running a little ahead. I attribute that to, we have a couple of people in transitional programs in the sexually dangerous program or at Moose Lake. And so we are paying a little bit more for some individuals that are in that, sorry, I have it here. So give an example. We tend to pay around $1,200 a month for those that might just be in a regular stay, and those that are in transition around $3,000. So that's for sexually dangerous. That same thing is happening in the mentally ill and dangerous. We have one individual who's been in the transitional program, and that runs around $9,500 a month. And for those that are in the main program, $2,500. For the mentally ill and dangerous, we did have that person that was in the transitional program discharged here at the beginning of July. And so I think we'll be within budget for that area coming into the end of the year, but maybe not with the sexually dangerous area. And then as you can see, DNMC, we're looking about kind of similar to last year at this time, or we're about halfway. So we'll knock on wood and hope that it continues.
Quick question for you. On the sexually dangerous and the MINDs, we pay the full boat on them regardless? No?
Nope, 20%. 20% of their cost of care.
Okay.
So it's not the full amount of their daily rate.
Because it would be difficult to figure out when they don't need medical care.
Yeah, no, there's does not meet criteria with those that are that are in those two programs. The only thing that we've seen is this, like, when they move to a transitional program, then you might pay a higher rate, there's a different rate for that.
And if I may interject on that, when they move to that transitional program, that has to go through the special review board, so there's a whole separate hearing with 3 doctors and a bunch of other professionals testifying on whether they think that individual should or should not move to that program, so.
Okay, and then it was interesting in looking at your numbers for Anoka versus CBHHs, and that Anoka initially was less expensive than a CBHH, which is interesting because Anoka handles a much rougher group of individuals than the CBHHs do. They ship them out right away to Anoka when they cause too much problems.
Yeah, and it's still going to be a little bit lower, but not as significant as it had been.
I see they're catching up.
Yeah.
When I look at the numbers, so somebody down there in accounting is recognizing that cost of care at Anoka is at least equal to, if not greater than, CBHHs.
Yeah. Yep.
Enough of my analysis.
Yeah, maybe the only other thing I would just point out, and maybe you see this already, but just under that first chart that I had, that on the bottom there, that's the number of individuals. So, that make up those numbers. So 13 for the sexually dangerous, 3 MI and dangerous, We had 3 DNMCs, 3 people, and then 1 person that met that over 30 days for that cost of care. On the back side, I just did just to show you total state operated cost year over year is at the top. And then the annual DNMC only. As you can see, we've made some significant gains since 2018 and 2019. And then the number of days is just there at the bottom, that people were not meeting medical criteria. And overall, the regional transition specialist typically is sitting at about 17 clients, 17 to 20 clients in the region. Average DNMC days for the first half of this year has been 2.3. His average for us was 3. Looking at our numbers, but for the region, 2.3. And so that's that. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you? Oh, sometimes we get asked how many pre-screenings for commitment we've had and what that number looks like. And we've had 50 pre-screenings to date, which is pretty similar to year over year. We do about 100 a year. That can fluctuate a little bit. Like last year, I think we only had 76. But the year before, we had 111 in 2019. So we're doing about the same amount of pre-screenings for commitment. We've been a little higher on the commitment between stays and full commitments. We're at 25, which is that right at around 50%? And year over year, that's been kind of more around 60-40. 40% that have gone to a full commitment, or commitment, I shouldn't say full commitment or a stay, and then 60% that have not.
One thing that I should note to everyone in the audience, because your voice tailed off, we're asking people to speak loud because Commissioner Coring and I can't hear.
Sorry.
We think there's a lot of echo in
I put my
here.
head down.
It's funny you should just say that, because I just looked up at that speaker. I thought we asked them to turn it this way. For some reason.
You can't.
Oh, you can't?
No. Notice most of the mics are on this side of the room, and the sound is on that side of the room.
Right, but nothing's pointing back at us, so it's kind of hard to hear.
What happens is if you point that speaker back at us, it starts catching the microphone, and it'll reverb.
Oh.
And that's when you're going to get
So we ask you to speak up.
high-pitched squeal.
And
all
not
the
put my
time.
head down.
That's when you're gonna get that
When you
high-pitched
tail
squeal.
off, it makes us nervous. Something that might not be clear. Anyway,
Similar to Kara's question, we've been coming quarterly to present this to you, and if there's any additional information that you would like me to bring, or things that you would like to see, or just please let me know. Or if you have any questions following this.
I don't know whose wheelhouse this is, but it's probably one of yours. We saw the state this year add costs for counties for youth going into the state system, similar to what is being done at Anoka. How do you expect that to impact us?
Yeah, that was a change. So the cabs now it'll be the same thing. So when they no longer meet medical criteria, we will be charged at 100% of the, I haven't read the exact language yet to find out if there's the cost of care after 30 days or anything like that. I don't know if Kara has any further comments on, I don't know that we've had a lot of placements there.
No.
Sorry,
no,
I'm turning
and,
again.
I would like to think in Crow Wing County that when a youth does not meet that level of care or is in need of that level of care, that we are expediting to get that youth to a more suitable setting that is outlined in statutes, and we know that's in the best interest of the youth and families. So
Oh, we don't use it very much, is what I hear you say.
correct, yeah.
It's not a very large facility. I'm trying to remember if it's even, I don't even think that so we kind of hear that it's not even difficult, it's difficult for us to even place there, but again, I think we try a lot of other things before we would kind of get to that level of need.
Cool. Thank you.
very good. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If we do have, we will get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll move on to protective sheltering recap.
Thank you.
So Kara, if I can ask you a question concerning individuals with disabilities, and they're moving the funding away from some of the lower level individuals, my son being one of them, so I know this is personal to me. And so in the sheltered workshops, they won't be providing, or they want to get away from
Shelter work.
the, now I forget, but where they're paying under the minimum wage, the piece rate pricing, or, so if that happens and the sheltered workshops can't provide the service because there's no money to reimburse, these individuals will stay in their group home. And how will that, just real quick, do you know how that will impact the expenses here? Because the care at the group home now will be higher. There's no other place to get, you know, before the workshops were getting their dollars from another pool of money.
Could I answer that question?
Anybody can
Okay.
answer that question.
Thank you. So we have had some of those situations already prior to this change, but because it's been a movement that's been, I think, they've been working towards. So if they're unable to work out in the community or do like job support or employment support, then some individuals go to day centers and do the day center, so they still get out for those activities. And I think the cost seems to be pretty similar from their waiver. And we have not had a number of individuals, like the AFC homes will come back and maybe try to negotiate that rate a little bit, but it, you know, it's really based on a person's need, if they really truly need to have that staffing, extra staffing in the home during that time that they wouldn't be there.
Okay.
So we can talk more about that if you have some more specific questions, but I don't think we've seen any kind of significant increase.
Well, I just find it interesting that sometimes, first of all, that's a place where my son particularly, that's his social life, that's his, where he gets his value in life. He's doing what his brothers and parents are doing and going to work. But you take that away from him, and that piece is gone. I don't care what price you put on it. And then if he's just going to sit in a chair at the group home, I find that unacceptable, but I will say that to my state legislators.
Yep.
But there's no cheap way out of it regardless.
Right. And
Taxpayer will pay one way or the other.
yes, yep, I hear you. And I, like I said, I do think that we try to work with the home as well as the individual and their guardians to look at what options are available so that they aren't sitting there and that isn't happening. But so I appreciate the comments for sure.
Well, I know Commissioner Franzine knows what that value is to these people to be able to go somewhere.
I agree.
I have a mother that sits in a nursing facility out here, and when you say, do you want to go have coffee? And I see her perk up because she just wants to get out of the facility, wants to get into a different environment. Same thing with these individuals. Even though we can't always have, they don't always express that, you can see it in their faces. You can see how much they enjoy getting out, and particularly with their own group of people. And, you know, they're not judged there. They're all on the same level. So anyway, enough of my pontificating, and we'll move on to what you're really here for.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Nathan Bertram, Adult Services Supervisor. Would you like me to wait for Commissioner Coring, or?
Only if you'll speak up.
I can speak up, but would you like me to wait for
Don't be
Commissioner
afraid to
Coring?
project in here. Just project.
Hey, I will do my best. If you can't hear me, I guess say something again. I'll do
What?
my best. As I trail off again. I'm here to talk about our sheltering and kind of recap that and some of the work we did under those grant dollars. And I was trying to figure out how to start, so I thought I'd just kind of summarize a little bit how we started in that area, and then I guess we'll go through a little bit of the numbers. While we're going through the numbers, if any questions jump out at you, I'd prefer you just ask as we're going through it rather than trying to jump back at the end, I guess. So sheltering work and emergency sheltering has always been a part of public health emergency preparedness. That wasn't new to COVID. We've always had plans for that. We've done workshops on that. And it's always been a part of that work in the case of an emergency. COVID-19, as we're all aware, there's lots of grant dollars, and one of the focuses on that was the homeless population. The thought being that those individuals are very transient. They tend to move around a lot, and finding a stable place for them to be during that time would reduce COVID spread, as well as that group tends to be underserved medically and lack medical assistance. So we believed there was a need in our community. Historically, our intake team, just at Community Services from 2017 on, saw about 16 to 20% of our intakes as being homeless, just walking in off the street and needing services and a place to go. So we had that data to kind of back that up, and then looking at the point in time data, and for those of you who aren't familiar with that, HUD out of the federal government mandates a count of one night of homeless individuals across the nation. For whatever odd reason, they've chosen, it's usually in the winter, usually in Crow Wing County, it's usually around January 20th, give or take a couple days, and where the weekends fall. So based off of that historical data, there was 20 plus individuals homeless on any given night. That ranged through the years. There's some years it was more, but never below 20. So when we looked at all that, we decided it was probably a good idea to at least attempt to get some of these grant dollars with your guys' permission, which we did, $821,000. So we standardized our intake processes to work with people as they're calling in, so we were trying to minimize contact. Standard intake, we talked about expectations, they needed to work with us, what plans we had moving forward, were they living in our county, and how do we move forward with them to kind of get them best served. And I guess before I jump too much into the data too, I do want to make sure we thank our partners, which was Lutheran Social Services, Salvation Army, Bridges of Hope, Sharing Bread, Career Force. Local law enforcement was a great help. We talked to them on a regular basis, both Brainerd and Baxter, and then just also my team. So let's see here. So we stepped into this model and we started standardizing our intake. For a while we rotated staff through, and we just realized that wasn't efficient and it was kind of a scheduling nightmare. We condensed that team into 3 to 4 main people who are going out there twice a week to meet with people, provide food. They would do ad hoc appointments in between there if people are needing the extra support and services. They worked at getting everyone who's eligible for MA onto MA. We also worked with them to get them on food benefits. They did housing apps and job apps. Every morning at 7:45 in the morning, even for those people who aren't morning people, we met, we talked about everything that went on. Monday mornings were always our day where we requested all incident reports from Baxter and Brainerd PD to review if any incidents that happened at the hotels were our individuals. Sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. If they were, then we took actions, whether we needed to look at different options or just plain needed to ask them to leave. So that was kind of the rigmarole day in, day out. I will also say those dollars, there was some in there for in case we need to isolate and quarantine. That the number that we actually had to quarantine was under a dozen. I think we had 3 or 4 positive tests that we had to kind of put in a separate room and then provide services at the door essentially and drop stuff off, and they'd have to use the phone to talk to us. And then there was another about 8 that were just on quarantine and weren't supposed to leave, but did not have a positive test. Any questions on kind of what that looked like before I start jumping through data?
You mentioned $821,000 worth of grant. Now, that wasn't just for the shelter. You're talking, was this for other ancillary things too, or is this just
That
shelter?
was just sheltering, and that went primarily to the 4 hotels that we used. There was some dollars for food in that grant, which we worked closely with Sharing Bread and Salvation Army to do the food, but you know, the little bit we wrote into our grant we used for things like milk and some fresh fruit on a at least weekly basis, if not bi-weekly. Staffing, so there wasn't a levy impact for those staff. And, cleaning and hygiene stuff, so shampoo, conditioner if needed, laundry services, our isolation quarantine rooms, we did have some set up things where someone could go in and clean those rooms after that individual is out.
So for the 821,000, do you know how many nights that covers or what the dates were?
I do. So overall, I'll jump to that quick since you asked, and then we'll jump back up. But there was 12,796 total shelter days. So if that's every individual for a night. So it was a significant amount of days, and it was 386 total shelter clients and 236 unduplicated households. So there was some people that returned. A lot of those, you know, some of them we tried one level of housing from there, and that was not working and not sustainable. They ended up homeless again. We talked with them, had a plan, okay, we're gonna go this route, and they had to be agreeable to that plan, and then we would try a different level of housing that could better meet their needs. And so that was some of that. Some of them were just, you know, we got some people off to treatment. Treatment concluded, they still didn't have a place. They came back for maybe a week or two until we could find that next place for them. That's what a lot of those were. And then, I mean, some of them were law enforcement calling on weekends saying, hey, we got John Doe, he's homeless, he's got nowhere to go, it's 30 below, can you guys put him up for the weekend? And we'd say, yep, we'll meet with them on Monday and try to get things sorted out and see what we can come up with. So, I think one of the unique things that we kind of realized, I didn't, I guess, anticipate to have a lot of older individuals in the shelter, which 13% of our population was over 55. I guess it just didn't dawn on me. I thought it was going to be more of that 20 to, you know, mid 40 type group that we'd have the most, which we did have the most. I just didn't think we'd have that many in that age generation. And I think one of the unique things with them was it presents its own challenges to get into an assisted living or some kind of more supported housing for individuals who had some disabilities associated as well. And with COVID and everything else, the parameters to get them in, there's a lot of hoops. So as you can see kind of by our average days, they were actually the second highest group of amount of days at the shelter before we could get them lined up for another setting, and families being the most difficult, and that was 23% of our total population, but on average it took 42 days to find them some kind of housing. Usually we were working with Section 8 or LSS very closely. I also should give a big thank you to the landlords too. A lot of them were willing to work with us through this process and come up with deposit and partner with different agencies to come up with the total dollars needed to get them to move in. I did not look at the longest family, but I want to say it was 211 days was the longest individual we had. And there was multiple barriers, and I think we were working with corrections and child protection on that case. So there was a lot going on, needless to say, but we did finally get them housed, and they were employed, I believe, at Super One. And they had 2 kids, and they did not, part of the reason it took so long is their kids were in our school district. They didn't want to move out of the area, so it had its own challenges. So those that we discharged, 162 of them went into another housing setting. Could have been apartment, could have been like group residential housing. I suppose there's a small group that went to adult foster care as well. On average, those who went into housing were there 40 days. Those who went to a higher level of care, such as CD treatment hospital, etc., was about 20 days on average. There's 33 of those individuals. And I think, one thing I think it was nice for corrections and even my SUDS team, we have people who get released from jail and you don't want them to disappear before you get them to treatment. It was kind of nice to have that temporary housing option for them, that we could keep tabs on them, I guess, for lack of better terms. But a lot of them didn't have cell phones, so if they just discharge for jail and go to, their friend's place, sometimes it's really hard to find those people again and say, hey, your treatment bed's open, let's get you going. So that was a nice option or benefit of having that for, like I said, the SUDS team and the corrections team. There was 46 individuals we just had to ask to leave. Either they were refusing to meet with us, refusing to work a plan, or they just had incidents that were not appropriate and they just needed to be asked to leave. Some of them went to jail. And then there's 145 that are unknown. And again, kind of when I reference this population as kind of transient, I guess I didn't break down all that 145, but there was a significant number who all of a sudden were just gone. And the hotel's like, yeah, they checked out on Monday and we were there on Tuesday, and we're like, well, where'd they go? And they didn't say. So there's a large group of that population that we just don't know. There is some individuals who had family in other areas of the state or out of state even, and with some of them we helped set up busing to get to their family where they could stay throughout the rest of the pandemic. Jumping over to income, I think, a large number of the 185 did not have any income, and this is as they reported upon entry. So a lot of them we were working with Career Force and just kind of our own knowledge of what we had heard for open jobs and trying to get them connected. 77 had some income, another 53 had some employment. There was, there's more than 6 veterans, but there was 6 individuals who were veterans who were receiving veterans benefits. And I think I'd just like to call out those who did have some income. A lot of those, we worked with those individuals on budgeting, and some of them owed past landlords, which was a barrier for them to get into new housing, so we worked on payment plans with them. Some of them had outstanding electric bills that prevented them getting into housing in other places, so we worked on budgeting to get that paid during that time. And then there's individuals too who we might have sheltered a little bit for a week or two until they got their next paycheck, and then we said, you're on your own, you have significant income to pay for this, and so then they were on their own as well. And I would also, White Oaks opened up during this time too in Baxter, which was kind of ideal timing for some individuals, because I think we did have there's 5 to 7 individuals that we were sheltering at that time that went to White Oaks. So that was, it was ideal timing. It was luck, I guess you might call it, but, and I don't know if you guys need me to go into race too much. I had to do that for my grant reporting, so I thought I'd throw it in there just for you guys to look at. Obviously, the largest chunk of Crow Wing County being Caucasian, and that's what we saw in sheltering as well. And then at the bottom there, I put the point in time count just for your reference with some trend lines on there. The average is about 28 for households with children, and 55 without. That count's doubled up too in that count, so you get a little bit higher numbers with that. So in 2020, I worked with Central Minnesota Housing they did not have the breakdown yet for those individual categories, so I just left it off at this point because it was too hard to kind of put in there and make sense of. questions on the sheltering piece and the bunch of data I just threw at you?
Go ahead.
Do these individuals mainly come out of the Brainerd-Baxter area, or are there outskirts of the county too that you?
Yep, and so that was part of our intake process, was to make sure they're actually from Crow Wing County or in our area, which is sometimes a challenge. I mean, we're digging through different state systems to try to figure out, okay, where were you the last time you got your benefits? Because you say you're living here now, but where are you? And so that was some ongoing discussion with people, but we did our best to make sure they were from our county and they were living here, whether it was they had mail from here or they were staying with a family. And I think the other thing, I mean, there was a small percentage where law enforcement would call over a weekend and they'd be like, I got John Doe, we don't know what to go with him. And we'd be like, we'll put him up for the weekend. On Monday, we'll assess the situation. And there was a number of those that on Monday then we said, you know, you're not from our county, you're from Ramsey County, for example. We'll get you on a bus down there. And that was kind of our process. It really was more working with law enforcement at that time, and they were kind of in a bind or dilemma because it was 30 below and they couldn't stay wherever they were trying to stay, and so.
Maybe.
Does that answer?
No, I think he's asking about the.
Is like, did from other communities outside of
Yes,
Brainerd-Baxter,
we did.
did this program benefit some of those individuals, or?
For sure. I mean, I don't know if we have the breakdown on the numbers, but I mean, I can remember specifically a couple of different individuals from the Pequot Lakes community and Crosby. So, I mean, yes, it was for anyone in the county that identified.
Did reach
Our
out
calls
to-
from law enforcement also weren't just from Crow Wing or
Nope, there's
Brainerd-Baxter.
Crosby and Deerwood as well, I know there's a couple from there. I think I had also premised, and I wanted to cover this in the beginning and I forgot. I mean, there was a number of counties who did take advantage of this grant funding, even our local ones. I know Cass had some dollars and Aiken had some dollars and Todd. I'm not sure about Morrison and Wadena off the top of my head, but I mean, it was pretty wide stretching to Stearns to Olmsted. I mean, there was lots of counties who were using this funding to do
And that did
similar work.
assist us in, especially those out-of-county people really, you know, saying you need to go back to your home county and look for
Your
what
county
they're,
has dollars
what they're providing during this time. But to answer your question, yes, it did serve.
And you said earlier that on average, there's 20 homeless people throughout the county?
The data would suggest that, yeah, on any given night, there's 20. And if you look, I mean, that was kind of on the side here, and I didn't talk about it exactly, but week in, week out average, so we had 32 individuals / families as an average through the 14 months that we did this in sheltering. So, I mean, if you went strictly off this sheltering data, you could say 32 individuals in Crow Wing County are homeless any night. But
And I think COVID had, you know, some piece in that though, that, you know, we had people who that would come in and say, you know, I don't feel comfortable staying with our family because they're not taking precautionary measures. They're letting everybody come in and people are coming and going. We had some individuals that didn't want to go to maybe an assisted living, even if that was an option, which sometimes even when we brought them in, they would, you know,
some pushback.
There was some pushback because they were fearful that they wouldn't be able to leave. They were nervous about that, you know. I think there were a couple that left, which, you know, it wasn't a significant number, but like just they left and then they showed up and then they didn't have any place to be.
I think the other thing I know too, I mean, the housing market was pretty decent and interest rates were pretty low, and I think there's probably a half a dozen where the landlord decided that they were gonna sell their property. And so we had people call and say, hey, my landlord is selling, I gotta be out in whatever 20 days. We don't know what to do. And a lot of times that conversation was, well, stay there as long as you can. Let's see what plans we can get in place before then. And then if we need to, we can look at this option for the interim. And some individuals, we found housing in that time frame, and then there was some who had to come to the shelter or the hotel for.
There's just a plain large variety of reasons that they do end up homeless.
Yeah. Yep. So I think the data shows that we believe that there's, you know, that around 20 potentially on any given night. The sheltering data showed more like 32, and so and we're saying, well, were some of those though due to COVID? Maybe, you know.
So to Commissioner Hoag's point, early on in your presentation, what you said was that the 4 hotels that you used, which I'm assuming were primarily in Brainerd Baxter, and you worked with the Brainerd Baxter police. And so my concern was similar to his, is that we're only focused on Brainerd Baxter. Then I got to thinking, well, it's 4 hotels that you used locally, and those were the 2 law enforcement agencies here. But that doesn't mean that the group only came from these 2 communities.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
Yeah, I
just in
think
your
there was a,
presentation, that's
and I already-
what hit me
Yeah.
also at that point. So.
yeah,
Yeah,
good
there was
point.
people, yeah, we got calls from, I think, Emily and Pequot. I mean, really all the towns with local PD, I think we probably heard from at least once. And I think, I mean, Brainerd Baxter, it's the hub for services, so if we're trying to tie someone in with mental health services or SUD services, I mean, everything's right here and it's easier to do that. Also cuts down on staff transport time. So, I mean, there's some benefits of trying to keep everything local.
I do remember, and I don't remember how that went, but we did have a family that was up in Breezy that was utilizing the Breezy Point Resort, and then as things were, they had to be out, and they were one of the families that I think we did end up, but we would have potentially worked to just keep them there, but it wasn't an option to stay where they'd been staying. And I remember a similar situation over, I think, at the Deerwood Motel. So when we did work to, if it made more sense to keep them where they were, if they were already staying in one of our local hotels, we did do that. But what Nathan's talking about is we did work kind of primarily with these 4 hotels.
Do you think that 20 is an accurate number, or do you think it's higher, and some are just kind of sliding under the?
I can't give you exact data. My gut would tell me that it's higher, but that, I don't have any specific numbers.
And this kind of leads into some of the, this population and some of the things that they're dealing with. And so one individual that, I'm thinking about right now that was homeless over the course of the summer, we worked to get into a board and lodge, didn't like the rules and what they could and couldn't do there, left, then, wanted us, then came back a couple of weeks later, was out just homeless and bouncing around. And then I think we arranged for another board and lodge. I want to say the person maybe stayed there for a month to 2 months maybe, and now we know is back in the community again, also homeless, not someplace. And so, I mean, this is a population that, I think struggles. They struggle with substance use. They struggle to, some of the options we offer them are not what they're looking for. They don't want to go into a setting where they're with a bunch of other people potentially, and that might be what they might be eligible for, or what we have available to them when they have no income. We did run into things like barriers with Social Security, like where they haven't done some certain things, and then you have to try to get that all rectified, and it takes time, and you gotta do the paperwork, you gotta get in and meet with Social Security and work to get those things rectified, and sometimes so then they have no income, So, yeah, just lots of different challenges I think that we see with this population. Some are, like I said, substance use, and been to treatment many times, and I don't really want to give this up. I'm not ready to give it up. So
Kara, do you have an
challenging.
exact answer for Commissioner Hoag?
Well, I wish I
I
did.
saw you jump right
Wouldn't that
up
be
to the
lovely? I was
microphone.
going to bring us to a close. So what we're doing now, I think the most powerful thing for me out of all of this is not only understanding the need, because we know there is one, right? But also those $800 and some thousand went back into our community, and I really think helped to keep those hotels during COVID afloat. Even though there was a lot of work associated with it, that money came back here, and we were able to pump it into our economy during that time. So we know there's a need, right, based on the data and the information that we've shared. So what are we doing now? Well, we came before you yesterday and talked about the Community Living Infrastructure Grant and the need to hire some additional staff to be able to do that work associated with housing. You have also approved, or you will hopefully, I almost jinxed it, approve an amount of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars to help us with evictions and mortgage assistance through our eviction clinic. That will be coming before the board at the next board meeting. And then there's also community discussion around a warming shelter and what that might look like within our community as well. So a group of stakeholders have been gathering to talk about that. So a lot of potential opportunity to deal with the need.
Very good. Other questions? And I appreciate, once we got the volume straightened out, you did a very good job of maintaining it.
Thank you.
I was going to say much better than Miss Lewick today. Your volume was good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What'd you say, take 5?
I need to take 5, so we'll have a 5-minute recess. Yep, 5-minute recess. Don't go anywhere, Paul.
No, no.
Good job.
I only have 3 of them already.
Ray is hoping to talk to you, Rosemary.
I know I already talked to him once this morning.
I think he said he had something else he was going to do here, so.
Tim, could you step out of, I'm not paused, so.
Nothing top secret.
No, I'm trying to figure out how to pause.
Hi.
I believe I can go here.
What the best setup is, I have one map on easel.
Probably right there. No, in front, I think.
In front?
Yep.
Okay.
Barry, I think I'm going to just have you turn it to be at a 90-degree angle to the table, because we'll catch it on this camera.
Like this?
Yep. So then, and then if you sit right next to it,
Okay.
cool.
Something on a flash drive that work?
Yeah, you can just set it right here, please.
We'll get it all set up.
Well, there was a lot of mining that went on at one time, wasn't there?
Yep.
Map, the most current map.
Okay, cool. Can I get a second one? I got a biker I work with that loves.
Hey, Barry.
Morning.
I was going to bring you a map today, and I left it right on my table, so I'll drop it off to the office on that route, that ATV route that we spoke about. They sent me a map, and I thought I'd give it to you just so you're kind of familiar, because I'm sure that'll come up at a meeting. Yeah, it was a hard copy of it.
Oh,
And I got, before I forget to, I gotta mention the team. I forget a lot these days. A couple days when I called, you remember Joan?
can you guys step in the back?
Yeah. What?
It's still live right now. Hey, Therese, can we somehow leave a message for planning and zoning not to turn these computers off?
I have a note, thank you.
Yeah, because I am not going to crawl underneath when my computer isn't on.
I understand. I
I
have
don't
it
even
written
know,
down
I
already.
don't even know what I do underneath there.
Before, and see if it's worth a look.
Okay.
All right.
Commissioner Coring, just a minute to come back.
Let me show you which trails I haven't rode on.
That's your district.
Funny.
Trails are way over my
Oh, I know.
capabilities. Oh,
Just
gosh.
call the ambulance before I go.
Barry, what do you want up on the screen?
I like that. Covered it all.
Yeah. It's been broke. I don't know if anybody knows that. Since planning and
Yes,
zoning.
and I don't know, it was working for me, but it couldn't work for them, but it's just
Go like
left,
this.
right pointer.
These guys.
I do that every time I see you.
Here, let's test it out.
I'll have to let Tim know.
Yep, just try it once. And point it more towards my computer's right underneath here, so. You're looking here, oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
I'll
There you go.
use my,
Use your
All
pad
right,
light.
perfect.
Your papers.
no, I'll just use my election
Yep.
certificate.
Oh, man.
All right.
You don't see them coming, do you? You don't see them coming.
Get started before he,
Mr. Osborne.
Hey, good morning. So I've never been at a board meeting before, so I don't know what's appropriate. I have a teaching background, so I will probably stand up and walk around by habit. So unless you want to.
As long as you speak loud.
Okay.
That's all we ask.
Okay, so microphone's here. Yeah. So what I want to go through is just basically an update of basically current development and then some, we'll see, I got talking points on here. Just to introduce myself, Barry Osborne, I've been with the DNR about 11 years. I actually started at Cuyuna Country State Rec Area my first year as a B&G, then moved over to Crow Wing State Park. I've been manager there for 5-6 years, something like that. So I'd managed Lindbergh State Park, Crow Wing State Park, and then the forestry units that are associated with that. Last fall, moved over to Cuyuna Country, so managing there, and then also the associated forestry units that manager oversees, so Pelican Beach, and then 2 other forestry rec area campgrounds. Okay.
Can we ask questions as it goes along?
Yes, please do.
So I got a question. Okay, so at what point did the rec area require a sticker and not require a sticker? When I'd have people come from out of town, I'd take them up to the overlook, you know, and the last time I was there, I was coming down and somebody in a white pickup said, "You don't have a sticker. I'm not gonna give you a ticket now, but you gotta have a sticker." That was the last time I ever went up there, took anybody up there.
As part of the Minnesota DNR park system, a rec area is considered a state park.
Okay.
So by that definition, it has always been planned that permits would be required, but that was a phase-in thing, but because it takes a lot of oversight to implement a program like that. So 4th year is my guess. I'm sorry, I wasn't around then, so I think it's been about 4 years. It's been kind of a soft opening, more of an educational, and at some point we will transition to enforcing those rules in the form of citations.
So if anybody goes in there in the parking lot where you want to go on the mountain biking trails, you have to have a DNR or a state park sticker to be able to go in there, correct?
Correct. So, and the state has different options, and I will touch on some of the different options too, but they have daily permits for $7, annual permits for $35. There is a disability discount, so that's $12 for an annual. And then there's veterans with disabilities, and that's a free permit for a year. those are.
Here we go again.
Here you go.
So, interesting. I can make it work here. Oh, kidding. Try that.
So just some talking points today, just a really brief historic review of Cuyuna. I'm not even going to touch on a lot of the history because I'm sure a lot of you are more familiar with it than me. And then just look at some of the current park development and then some of the challenges that we're facing. And that's the majority of the time I'd like to spend is on the challenges and then how we're going to adapt to those or mitigate some of those challenges. So that's the main focus. And then, because I worked on this late last night, mining our economic future. So how is this Cuyuna rec system and the community going to interact?
Sorry, that was me.
Sorry, I jumped ahead. Now I know some of these numbers aren't exact depending on which literature you look at, but it gives you a timeline. So mining started approximately 1907, towns established, depending on which small town you're looking at in that time frame. Production peaked, mining kind of faded out late 50s, 93 kind of rec area established, and there's a reason I left the last one blank, because this is a timeline, so it's going to continue. But the main point of this is that the mining and the town and eventually the rec area have all interacted. As the mining developed, the town developed with it, and mining decreased, the town kind of declined at that point. So park development, as many of you might know, by statute, we have to consult the Citizens Advisory Council. They are there to help with the development of that park. Again, this is going to be real quick. Brief history. Development requires funding, many different sources, IRRB, park budgets, grants, legacy, volunteers, etc. Many I'm not touching there. Latest bike trails. Now, as you're going to see, not everything Cuyuna is bike trails. That's one point I wanted to get across here today. But some of the biggest developments going on right now, we just opened the Monoman unit. This is advanced bike trails. And what this is meant to do is to expand the trail system that's there to bring in more people that are looking for these specific types of challenges. Okay, so Monoman unit, up on the top you can see it says Monoman North, which is actually up in this area. Okay, so this trail system that's been developed right now is right there. Zoom in a little bit, it's right south of Morocco Lake, and we have different, depending on difficulty levels, this is probably not in your maps because this is the brand new trail, so it's not, those maps were published a couple months ago. So as you can tell by this, there's plenty of new trail, there's about 10 new miles, and just looking at the names of them, Sledgehammer, is an indication of the difficulty levels that are associated with these. Some of the trails and what they look like. I'm sure if you follow social media, you've been seeing some of this stuff come up.
It looks like a trail, it's like a cliff.
That's a trail.
People actually survive those?
They love them. They love
Now
them.
this has been open about 2 weeks, and we've had an extensive signage to get the point across to people. And the way we develop these trails is we put what's called filters at the beginning of them. So the beginning of a trail might be a 4-foot drop. So that's an indication of the skill level that's coming down the trail. And we have pictorial signage there so people aren't getting injured. And the first 2 weekends we had volunteers, the mountain bike crew there, and some of my employees indicating the skill levels that are required. So talking to people, not only individual skill levels, but the equipment necessities that are required for riding these trails. No incidences were reported to us in the first 2 weekends. People love this stuff.
There you go, Steve.
We should go on a field trip.
That's Paul.
Yeah.
That should be our
That's
next
Doug.
natural resource.
It's had us evaluate our system, because what we've called black in the past is probably more of a medium now. So we are more on a national scale. We are seeing people from all over the nation come here to ride these specific trails. Continuing after North Monoman is Sagamore. We're working on it. It'll be going this year and through next summer. The Sagamore unit will be closed. That's right south of Riverton. We are putting an adaptive trail and then more bike trails, and then an event area. So event area out there is like a canopy for picnics, parking lot, and bathrooms and stuff like that. So again, over there, to give you reference, the Sagamore unit, it's in red, it's on your map, so that is closed all this year, all next year for this development. Now these companies that come out there, they are some of the best in the whole country at designing these trails. So right south of Riverton, zoom in a little bit on that one, kind of where stay out of, that's where the new parking lot is going to be. So you're going to come off from 59 into the parking lot there, and then there will be an adaptive, or basically a blacktop trail that's, and it'll kind of follow that white line and go up about like that. There'll be about 5 miles of adaptive bike trail. So what does that mean? What clientele are we designing this for? So these are some of the, main focus is people with physical limitations. So this is a 3-wheel hand cart or hand cycle with electric assist on it. So this last week we had about 4 different riders come up to kind of preview or test out our trails, and that's meant to do a couple things. To establish communication with the group of people that they have connections with, to gather information, and to test the limits of not only the equipment, but our trail system too. So we can easily put them on a tar trail like Paul Bunyan or Taino Lake State Trail, but what does that look like? These bikes can actually handle some dirt trails too. So we have some individuals that like the asphalt, and it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be for balance, it could be for perception, reaction time, all that. But if we widen out some of the dirt trails a little bit, it's going to be a lot easier for bikes like this or other individuals. So we're giving opportunities, a wider range of opportunities. Another one. These bikes are not cheap by any means, but so we're looking at how these bikes handle these trails and how we would make them so we could interact with other bicyclists too. We've eliminated a lot of the two-way systems in there, which that would not work for adaptive bikes. It would have to be 10 feet wide for them to pass. So we learned a lot on design of trails. What are some of the challenges? You wouldn't want that wheel stepping off the side there. Creates a lot of issues. This is a recumbent bike. It's not really necessarily an adaptive bike, but we got a good feel for how these bikes would handle those, and they handle them with no problem, especially the electric assist bicycles. The state does actually have limitations on the wattage for electric bikes, so there is not really a concern about electric bikes ripping up the trails because of the torque that's associated with them. So Sagamore is the bike trail system. We're also looking at public water accesses. Some of the ones we are looking at is June Lake, which is, I'm looking at two maps here. Around here. Okay, so an access down here on June Lake. Also looking at one up here on Monoman, because we want to provide access to multi-use for the rec area. That's what it's there for. So we really have limited access to some of these lakes for fishing, for kayaking. So that's one of the goals that I am specifically looking at now. There's also another little one that might come right off from, right in about there. And some of those, that's meant to alleviate some of the issues we're having with parking in other locations. So kayak canoe routes, we're also looking at those. We've seen a big uptick in the number of canoes and kayaks. Right now there's at least 4 vendors that I see out there almost every weekend renting out canoes and kayaks. This is some of in the management plan, some of the potential routes. The first one that we'll be opening up is, this is the Rally Center right at number 5. If you go towards number 2, it's an 850-yard portage up to Allstead. You can come back to that whole system. There's a bridge there between Monoman 1 and Pennington and come back. So with one portage from that parking lot, there'll be about a 3-mile loop minimum. And like I said, this is probably one of the perfect venues for kayaking around here. They're longer, narrow lakes. They typically don't get a lot of wind, and the water is crystal clear. This is an exception. This is a triathlon, but this kind of shows you some of the usership capacity that can be at these areas.
Is that South Long Lake? I think that's my little park.
And of course, we're always looking at shore fishing, scuba, hiking, etc. in other areas because multi-use. So challenges, change always presents challenges. One of the biggest ones we have now is parking issues. We have approximately 7 parking lots, about 300 spaces. During the week, it's fine, but on weekends, or if we have special events, it's a stretch, to say the least. And I know this is close to home here, but parking on county roads, city streets, ditches, there's always a safety aspect that goes to that. The county has, just recently, made some changes here, but I find it empty. It is. And as I look at it, there's a lot of close proximity there of vehicles, people loading and unloading. But I can tell you one thing. Throughout the U.S., there's numerous areas. If you go to California, on the coastal region, you have parking exactly like this with traffic going by. But they typically don't have the bigger bikes and stuff like that that are loading, unloading. So it's on the radar, but as you know, any changes that are made, there's always things that are associated with that. So some solutions that we're looking at, the Sagamore event area parking is definitely going to spread out our use. So that parking should be alleviated from the Rally Center. We also have free vehicle pass checkouts at local library. You can go into Brainerd, check out a state park pass, and I think it's like 7 or 14 days, I'm not 100% on that you can put on your dash and go to any state park, free of charge. I don't know if the other towns have it, like Crosby, Ironton, that's something I'm gonna check. I mentioned this, free veterans with service-connected disability. The disability discount I didn't put up there, that's $12. But we just have to continually be aware of restrictions and anticipated effects. As we don't want to eliminate parking in one area, which you know, and shove that issue somewhere else. I think we have enough infrastructure that we have locations where you can park for free. Along the Cayena Lake State Trail, there's a part over and there's the Croft parking lot. Permits are not required there. And then over towards Riverton, the Cayena Lakes Trail parking lot. Permits are not required there. So we might have to restrict special event sizes until we can accommodate those parking situations. Then the unforeseen, we never know. EMX access and response, okay, another challenge that we're facing all the time, especially when we open up new trails that are called backcountry trails. They're specifically designed that you have to ride quite a ways to get to. And they're some of our most challenging. Again, the Monoma North unit, but we have approximately 5,000 acres of rec area within our statutory boundaries, so that's a large area to respond to. And the closest service, of course, ambulance service, is Crosby. But Crosby is a busy system also at times, and so other ambulances like North Memorial come in to cover that area. North has no idea on this unless they've ridden the trails. So that's one of my goals, is to have better communication with all parties that will be responding to these areas and where they have to be located. So solution, multi-agency assistance, Crosby Ambulance, North, helicopter services. Now we have 2 out of Brainerd now. Municipal, police and fire, county and state. So dispatch, getting dispatch on board with dispatch so we have a better way of communicating with the ambulances that are going out there from county.
Mr. Chair, have you?
Yes, go ahead.
This kind of goes along with this. I got a quick 2-minute story that you might be interested.
Let me get that
started.
started.
So I've done a lot of stuff in my life, and one thing I did is at one time I had a funeral car service, and I had a contract with Crow Wing County, and I did all the medical examiner calls. And I happened to be up in Crosby. I don't remember the reason why I was at Crosby. I was at the holiday station. And when I pulled up and parked, I had a van, because that's what I used for removals. And there were some people standing there, and me, being the chatty guy that I am, I started chatting with these people, and the guy was leaning against my van, and his wife was there. And I says, well, what are you guys doing? He said, well, we're from Wisconsin, and we're diving in the mine pits. And that was on a Saturday. And then on Sunday, I said, yeah, we got a medical examiner call at the emergency room in Crosby. And when I walked in there, I looked up, and it was the guy's wife. They had gone diving in the mixture. There was something about the mixture in there. I mean, it really kind of threw me off, because here the day before, the guy was leaning against the van that would take him away. I mean, it was just blow your mind. So I appreciate you making sure that, when people are recreating there, that we can get them out of there and try to save their life. So
thank you. I have kind of a special connection because I still work for North Memorial, so
okay.
I've worked for them for about 11 years, so I understand when they get dispatched over there, if they don't ride the trails, they have no idea.
Yeah.
So how do we fix that is definitely on my radar. And we've had communication, like with Crosby. They've never had keys to our gates in the past. So now we're going to make it map for their ambulance. They're gonna have gate keys. They can access those points, and then we'll have specific signage that'll tell them, you know, they'll get a dispatch maybe to the 911, the blue number, then they'll come in there through the gate, and then we'll have signage pointing to them. So if someone is able to speak, they can tell them what trail they're on at least, and we can get to the pickup points for that. So it's something that definitely we're gonna spend some time on.
Yeah.
Other challenges, I forgot some here, but signages, where to park, where to buy a permit, where am I? How to get to trails, are permits required? You know, all this stuff is, and like I said, challenges, they present opportunities to provide better service. So right now we're looking at a comprehensive wayfinding update or package, and this is what it is. It's just standardized signs throughout the whole state of Minnesota. So if you go driving by, you see a sign that says state park or says something, you know it's a state park, not a county, not a private, or whatever. And all the directions and all the requirements will be there. And of course, ADA compliance. Public water access in lake use, limited parking for boats is, especially when they're competing with other users. Boater conflicts, kayaks and paddleboards, which I said we've seen that increasing versus boats or other watercraft or fishermen. Okay, going back to this, these are the routes. I talked about the one route. So it's something that's not real common knowledge. So look at Pennington Bay. So by statute, the park has ownership all the way around those lakes. So we can govern the speed limits on them. Those are set at 10 miles an hour. If we do not have ownership, 100% ownership, like up there, then we cannot set speed limits to it. So this is a point I really want to look at. I would hate to see user conflict in that area. We have a lot of beautiful lakes in this region. I think we have to be very, very cautious at how these interactions and spend some time looking at those possible interactions for safety at a minimum. So I don't know if the answer is speed limits, but what that does, of course, it reduces erosion and border conflicts. You're not going to have a speedboat or a jet ski going by swamping canoes or paddleboards. And there's not, like I said, this is one of the best venues out there for those non-motorized type of uses. And of course, enforcement is going to increase safety. DNR, there's some enforcement fine points with conservation officers enforcing stuff like on that last one. So if there was speed limits put up in that Monoman area, the COs can't enforce them. So that would be a county enforcement. Other challenges, new state rec area, perimeter, development and access points. So as the community grows around the rec area, it is going to bring in challenges with that. So I talked about the, up by Morocco, there's Trombled up there, and then right above Minoan Lake, the center piece there, that is a city road. It's starting to see a lot of development. All those lots are being sold off. And then I think the information being relayed that there is an access point, which there never has been. There's been old haul roads that people have accessed through there. So with that new trail development, it kind of eliminated that old haul road. So as the community grows, we're going to have requests for access points. Whether parking is associated with that, we definitely don't know. But around the rest of the rec area, there's a bunch of B&Bs, just little places to stay that are popping up all over the place. Okay, so these are going to bring in inherent challenges with them. So with all the challenges, how do we meet them? How do we adapt for this? Build on what we know. Okay, we're learning as we go. There's nothing else in the state system like this SRA. So we're going to implement, of course, corrections based on data. We're not just going to kind of guess and pick stuff out of there. So how are we going to collect the data? By counters on the park side. So we're looking at vehicle and bike pedestrian counters. We have cooperative agreement with the Department of Transportation, like on the Paul Bunyan State Trail. There's counters on there so they can gather data on usership. We're going to get those over in Calumet too. Currently we have 5, 3 more to install, plus another DOT one. So once we see this data coming in, we know where we have to make changes, whether it's parking, etc. We can track permit sales, annuals, dailies, library permits, and camper bookings. But one of the biggest things is outreach and availability. We have to have close contact with the chamber, to the business, to the government, county, etc. And that's where I'm going to concentrate on, is making sure we have good relations with those and people can get a hold of me at any time. So again, to review the talking points today, quick history, park development, mostly the challenges is what I wanted everyone to see that we're looking at. How are we going to adapt to these challenges? And then how is it going to affect the economic community of that area? Economic future. So from 2021 on, we don't know. So, any questions?
Just an observation that this is a tremendous economic opportunity for our area. I think we've already seen the growth over there in the Crosby, Cuyuna area. So, but it's also going to present some challenges in how do you get all these user groups to like each other, because they all have a different agenda. And so I think you've taken on a pretty big task over there, but I think we appreciate what you're looking at and what you're proposing. But it is learning as you go kind of thing. So I just want to thank you. I think this is great for our area, and we're glad it's in Crow Wing County.
Do you give these out free?
Yes.
Okay. Could I have a couple more?
Absolutely.
You want some
I could leave
South
this
Long
stack if you.
Paul,
Actually, I have
You missed that you can get a park permit, check out at the Brainerd Library whenever you want,
Oh, really?
like a book. Check out the park permit.
You know, I don't know, I shouldn't tell everybody that I got a little tiny little Airbnb, and I am shocked that the amount of people that are coming here specifically for that. Oh. It's a destination, you know, and I know when I was a state senator, Commissioner Hogue came down and I was able to help with some funding to help with the development of that, and I can remember, well, we can remember how Crosby was, and look at Crosby now, and it's all because of this, you know. So it's just it's wonderful, and so there was, and that, it isn't only the mountain biking. You're right. There was people that came just the other day. They had kayaks, and I said, "Well, what are you guys doing?" "Oh, we're going up to the Cuyuna Rec area," and they went up there for 3 days in a row. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's going to be exponential, the water aspect of it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yep.
Back when you and John Ward worked on that, you probably had the ability to void out the need for a pass.
Yeah,
But you
I would
overlooked
think that I wouldn't need a pass.
And your
So I
idea
was
back
kind of
then.
offended when he says.
Probably your idea.
I think we went from mining ore to mining gold over there is what I think we've done.
Well, it's-
Thank you.
Good presentation,
uh,
thank you
Yes,
so much.
Mr. Osborne, thank you very
That's
much.
huge.
We appreciate it. A nice collaboration between the county and user groups and, you know, the city and just everybody. It's a nice opportunity over there, so.
I like it when the DNR tries to collaborate with us at the county and lake associations and stuff like that. So,
Ask him a question on something.
Oh,
Deb, I hope you're not going to tell us that we have to redistrict.
I'm not going to tell you that at all.
Really?
I'm just going to give you some details. Not even details, I'm going to give you a high level info.
Okay. Well, this is the high,
A little bit, so, but I can go over what you got.
Oh, you were gonna show
I
it
can share
your
either way,
own.
however you want me to do it.
Oh, go for it.
put these in the boathouse. People are going to go crazy over that.
good.
I'll retain my 5-star rating.
Charge for those.
I'm going to charge for these.
Probably will.
$1 a piece. Never thought of that. Did we ever find out, thank you, did we ever find out who else was on there? Or no?
Yes, it was the 9 o'clock. It was Kyle.
Oh, we should ask Kyle. We could have asked him and got it all resolved.
I told him that Ryan would be reaching out.
Okay.
Was he in a different time zone?
I do not know.
Okay. Debbie?
Good morning. It's still morning. I promise I'll get you out of here before it's afternoon. So I just wanted to come before you this morning and give you a little bit of information on that word we keep bandying about, that redistricting. Just because I know some of you haven't been through redistricting before, I'll give you a little bit of an idea of what it entails, and then I can kind of give you a timeline of when we're going to actually be talking more about it. But first off, what redistricting actually is the process of redrawing the boundaries in election districts after each decennial census. And the census being done in the 0 year, the data is compiled in the 1 year, and redistricting happens in the 2 year. So I'm giving you the information now in the middle of 2021, but this process really won't be happening until 2022. The biggest process or the biggest purpose of redistricting is to make sure that there is equal representation of the districts, of the people that you are serving amongst your different districts. And like all things COVID related in 2020, the census was not any different. It was affected just like everything else. Typically, we would have seen information for apportionment, which is the assignment of the U.S. House of Representatives seats across all the different states throughout the country. That typically, we would have seen that announcement happen probably in December of 2020, maybe early in February of 21. The first data, because of all the challenges that they had in budgetary, completing the census, COVID-related, all the things of getting everything into play, was actually released in April 26th of this year. And what this little graphic map here shows is Minnesota increased by about 7.6%. This is the level of detail that we have on data yet from the census. We only have it at the state level. We don't have anything more granular than that at this point. So we don't know what Crow Wing County's increase was yet.
Don't know if you have to,
I won't be able to tell you, won't be able to know that yet at this point, but I'll show you a timeline when we will know some of that, hopefully. Minnesota increased by about 400,000 people, which was about 7.5%, which was on trend with the U.S. national average of about 7.5% as well. 22.7 million people were counted, more people were counted in the United States in the last census. And when we talk about apportionment, for the last census in a row, Minnesota got the last congressional seat. So we got the last seat in the House of Representatives, which essentially means we kept our 8th congressional district. by 26 people who were counted in 2020. So if you recall back in 2019, when we started talking about the census and how we wanted to get the word out and why it was so important that we had every person counted, this is why. This is one of the reasons why, is to make sure that we still maintain our representation at the federal level, as well as when we talk about programming at the county level as well. So who actually is responsible for redistricting? Well, there are multiple layers of redistricting here in Minnesota. The legislature is actually tasked with drawing new lines for congressional and legislative districts. The House and Senate at the state level, as well as those U.S. representatives levels, the congressional districts at the federal level. That is up to the legislature to complete that process. The last couple of censuses, or last couple of redistricting, that's actually ended up in a court process versus being done at the legislature. If the legislature cannot complete their work on a timely basis to get that done, then the courts can step in and order redistricting of those federal and state districts to be done. You, as the county commissioners, are responsible for redistricting at the county level. You draw the lines for county commissioner districts. Those cities and townships are all responsible for their own redistricting if they have multiple precincts or things that they have to change at the city or township level. Now, in Crow Wing County, all of our townships and all of the cities, except for the city of Brainerd, elect all of their representatives at large. They're governed, or they're elected to govern the whole entire city or township by all the residents of the city or township. The city of Brainerd has aldermen or city council member who are elected by ward, by area of the city. Those specific areas will have to be redistricted to be able to make sure that that population is equally spread as well. Also, here in Crow Wing County, all of our school districts elect at large, so there's no redistricting that has to be done at the school district level. There are some school districts and soil and water, I didn't put that on here, but there are some soil and water districts across the state as well who elect their representatives based on where they live within those different districts. That is not the case here in Crow Wing County. All of our school districts and our soil and water districts all elect at large. So I had somebody ask me once why soil and water districts don't match county commissioner districts. You know, we have districts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in both, but the lines are not the same. Part of the reason is we don't have to redistrict soil and water districts. They were put in place, that's what they were. They don't have to change because everybody in the county votes for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the soil and water district areas. As time has changed and your county commissioner districts have shifted, that's caused some of that change to occur between the two things that way. So here's the time frame. This is the timeline when we start talking about redistricting. This is perfect world ideal timeline that we are working with at this point in time now. We expect county level data, census block, census tract level data to be released by September 30th. That's a little later than what we typically would have seen happen, but we're hoping that we will see that level of data come out from the Census Bureau by September 30th. The legislative session begins next January, and they have until February 15th to establish those legislative and congressional lines. If they can't complete that work by February 15th, the courts will probably need to be stepping in to make that boundary lines and adjustments that have to happen there if the legislature is unable to do so. Once the legislative and congressional lines have been set, then the cities and townships have to draw their precinct lines, and they have until March 29th or within 60 days of legislative district redistricting being completed. Then the county takes their turn at doing county commissioner district redistricting, and that has to occur by April 26th or within 80 days of the legislative hearing or the legislative boundaries being drawn. Everything has to be done by May 3rd, because May 3rd is 14 days prior to filings opening for offices for 2020, and you have to give 14 days notice of what offices and districts will be on the ballot for 2022. So you can see how tight that time frame is going to be from the beginning of the year, the biggest key piece is that legislative and congressional redistricting, because nothing can occur the layers down until that happens. And like many things, the county is the last piece of the puzzle. Everybody else gets to put their puzzles in first, and then we come along and do our part with that. So I won't be able to tell you whether you actually have to run again, or if you're going to have to stand for election, until closer to April is probably what we're going to be looking at.
So if things have changed in Crow Wing County in the last 10 years, there is a good possibility that 5 of us could possibly.
There's always that possibility. And I have a couple of examples that I'll show you the methodology that goes into that.
So how much does it have to, how much can it be the difference between the districts before it has to change?
I've got a slide that'll show exactly
okay.
that in just a little bit here.
Sorry.
No, you're good. It's a good question, and I thought you might ask that, so we'll come to that one. But the key thing that kind of plays when we talk about when we talk about our congressional and legislative redistricting, they can follow whatever, they can draw their lines however they want. Legislative and congressional districts do not have to follow natural features, they don't have to follow precinct lines. If you look at this little map up here, the yellow is one legislative district. This is a hypothetical, by the way, this is just made up. Everything you're seeing today is just made up out of my brain, not actual true numbers or anything. The yellow part is one legislative district, the red part is another. All the little red lines around are townships or cities that are within those districts. But you can see how that legislative line went right through the middle of that particular township. They followed their boundary based on how they wanted to. Once legislative district redistricting is done, then the precincts start to put their data into play. And precincts have to follow established precinct boundaries. So precincts have to follow legislative district boundaries. If you, whoops, let me go back to this one. That one. If you look at our little map here, there's a purple line that now made that one township into 2 different precincts, because you cannot have more than one legislative district in the same precinct. The precinct lines must follow the legislative districts. So that's why legislative redistricting goes first. Then cities and townships for their precinct level redistricting. Then the county will come through and we'll show how that will all work out as well. You as the county board are also responsible for redistricting the precincts in unorganized territory. Second assessment, pretty easy. We're going to have 1 precinct in second assessment. First assessment, I've said it before, is the largest population of an unorganized territory in the state of Minnesota. Typically, when we are talking about unorganized territory, large land mass, little population. Ours is opposite. Smaller land mass, higher population. Right now, that first assessment district of unorganized territory is 3 precincts for the purpose of commissioner redistricting. You can make that territory into as many or as few precincts as needed. So I would just want to make sure we keep that in mind as we move into that conversation. We can change what those boundaries are. When we get to the county commissioner level of redistricting, the things that we are going to keep in mind are those municipalities that have multiple precincts. The city of Brainerd currently has 9 precincts. 8 of them are based on the populations within those 4 wards. There's 1 precinct, because legislative lines can be drawn wherever they want, that has 7 people in that particular precinct. Crow Wing Township has the same thing. They have a precinct that has 7 people in 1 precinct, in Crow Wing Precinct 2, because the legislative line was drawn in those areas. And that's now probably, hopefully, going to be corrected in this next redistricting process. We also will need to make sure we're taking a view at any municipalities that are split by legislative or congressional district. Crosby, many decades ago, was split into 2 precincts because they used Highway 210 as a split between a legislative district and another legislative district. That's how Crosby came to be into 2 precincts. Cross Lake had previously been 2 precincts because they did it for voter management, to be able to handle the number of voters who were going into each of their polling places. Both Crosby and Cross Lake took action prior to 2020 to consolidate into one precinct because they only had one legislative district, one commissioner district, and they elect all of their representatives at large. So those two have been currently consolidated, but that doesn't mean that's how it will stay after the legislative lines are drawn. Those are the things that we're going to keep an eye on when we get to the commissioner level of redistricting.
Deb, somebody told me that Bill's house was going to be redistricted into Cass County. Is there any truth to that at all?
Probably not going to be redistricted into Cass County. Might be redistricted into Commissioner District 1, but not into Cass County.
This is, I really have a serious question, believe it or not. But Tim, maybe you'd know this, but it seemed like Morrison County, I don't know how the lines ever got drawn years ago, but Morrison County, it's like Little Falls was the center, and every commissioner, maybe I was wrong, but it seemed like every commissioner district was touching Little Falls.
3 of them did.
3 of them did.
But, I mean, historically, there's a lot of, gerrymandering, basically writing a district in really weird ways. They also had the commissioner for the southern part of Little Falls representing Harding at one point. So they drew districts historically very strangely. The most recent one, 3 commissioners have a portion of Little Falls, similarly to what we do with Brainerd.
Okay. 3 commissioners have part of Brainerd.
Part
Right.
of Brainerd.
And I've got a slide that's going to tell about that too.
We don't necessarily have to do it that way.
Right, you don't have to do it that way. And
No,
there
I know.
are ways, and when we get to scenario time, we're going to give you multiple scenarios that you, as the commissioners, are going to choose from. Which one do you want to adopt as part of your plan? But I'll give you some reasons as to why we're going to have different scenarios and what they might look like as well. You don't even have to, you might not have to redistrict. Depending on how those lines come out at the legislative level and the precinct level, when we run the numbers, our precincts, our districts might be fine just exactly as they are. But if your boundary had a change in a commissioner district based on a legislative line, or if there have been annexations or detachments that are now making things non-contiguous in commissioner districts, or if you have population changes that cause imbalance or population shifts, that's why you have to redistrict. In most cases, in a county that is growing at kind of the rate that Crow Wing is and seeing that growth in different areas, one of those things is probably going to happen. And as such, we will probably have to redistrict. You can choose to go through a redistricting process even if none of those things fall true. So if you have no forced reason to redistrict, you still have that opportunity to do so as the county board. But when we come to create those districts, here's what has to be kept in mind. They have to have as many districts as we have commissioners. Crow Wing County has less than 100,000 residents right now, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have less than 100,000 residents when the census info comes out. As such, you are maintained at 5 county commissioners. That means you have to have 5 county commissioner districts. You have to use those precinct lines to create those boundaries. We can't just say part of one little precinct is going to be in this district and part is going to be in another district. And the districts have to be contiguous, regular, and as compact in form as possible. This is your current map. Contiguous, regular in form, and compact as possible. In a perfect world means a nice little square. That is not how land features go, and even in Crow Wing County, when we're pretty much a nice little 999 square mile rectangle, we still can't come up with nice little squares for each of you for your districts. But if you look, your color blocks are all contained contiguously and compact as much as possible. You don't have green up in District 2, and you don't have yellow down in District 3. They have to be contiguous, which means those precincts or those boundaries have to be touching the other boundaries. That's the contiguous piece. So when I say Bill's house may be redistricted into District 1, probably not going to be the case.
That's what some legislator told me.
So the other thing that you have to keep in mind when you set those boundaries is that the population has to be nearly equal in population in each district as much as possible. There is a 10% rule, and what the 10% rule says is this. You take your county population and divide it by the number of commissioners. That's going to give you that average number of how many residents you should have within your commissioner district. 10% of that is the threshold that you can deviate from that and be considered in compliance with your redistricting plan. So I picked on Commissioner District 1 because I figured Commissioner Coring might have a question on this. Again, these are made-up numbers, so just FYI, don't hold me to this. But let's say Crow Wing County has a population of 63,855, and that's the number Mr. Hool's been bandying about with COVID-related items, so could be pretty close.
Infection rates, that's the population figure the state has used for us.
Really? Okay.
If we divide that by 5, your average population should be about 12,771. That's how many constituents approximately you guys should each have in your district. And if we take 10% of that, your threshold is 1,277. So now let's say that Commissioner District 1 has a population of 12,299. If we look at that average of 12,771 and subtract 12,299, the variance is only 472. That's within that 10% threshold. Based on the 10% rule, we don't have to make any changes to District 1 because District 1 has the necessary number of people within that average threshold of how many he is supposed to be representing. That's the 10% rule that has to be considered when you're drawing your district lines. That's different. We're going to talk about a 5% rule in a couple minutes that determines whether you have to run again. But the 10% rule is saying how many residents, how many constituents are you supposed to have within your district. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is this really weird statement. And I know it sounds weird, but I'll try to explain it. A majority of the districts can't have a minority of the population. Don't say it 5 times fast because you'll get it confused in your head.
3 commissioner districts that total less than half.
That is exactly it, but it's a little bit more convoluted because it's the 3 smallest population commissioner districts must have the majority of the population. So you can't say that District 1 has 12,299 and District 2 has 8,112 and District 3 has 4,075.
Then my vote has more weight here then.
If you want to go by vote by per capita.
In your mind.
Where's
Yeah.
my election certificate?
Yeah, we're in there. Here it is. Watch your fingers.
Basically, all this is saying is you can't make, it's not a popularity contest in the fact that the 3 smallest precincts must have more population than the 2 largest precincts. You can't heavy load 2 precincts and say, well, the other 3 precincts have a lot of population in them too. The 3 smallest have to have the majority of the population within the county. So lots of things that we'll be looking at when we get to that point.
What you see here is that there are those it can't, must, shall. What you run into is
It doesn't always work that way.
you can't necessarily always meet all of them.
Exactly.
And so then you're picking which ones you're going to throw overboard, which is why we're required to publicly tell people
Exactly.
what we plan to do.
So when we do create a plan, that last bullet at the bottom, you have to publish it in the newspaper and have a public hearing on your redistricting plan. You have to give at least 3 weeks of notice of when that plan is going to be heard at a public hearing, and you have to be available for public comment on whether or not they like that plan. The things that the plan has to include is a description, like a legally defined description of each district. All of Oak Lawn Township, all of Brainerd, Ward 2, Precinct 3, whatever it might be. You have to physically describe that. You have to put the district number in the plan. District 5 will include A, B, C, D. And you also have to have a schedule of elections to make sure that you have staggered terms. So if all 5 of you would end up running for office again, you have to decide who's running for a 2-year term and who's running for a 4-year term, because you can't all be up for election at the same time. You have to continue to have staggered terms. Those can be changed. However your current pattern is, you can change that pattern to fit whatever the needs are. But you have to make sure you continue to have staggered terms.
So go ahead.
My question is this, you talked about the timelines earlier. Now you're saying we have to have a 3-week
Yep.
notice for a public hearing.
Yep.
How does that fit into that timeline that you talked about earlier?
Very, very tightly. That timeline is going to be extremely compressed and extremely condensed, which is why you have to have adopted your plan. Like I said, everything has to be done by May 3rd. Ideally, we're going to be looking at having that plan adopted early April. It's probably going to be late April, most likely. And we're going to have to probably have on our agenda 2 meetings before that of when you're going to set that public hearing so that you make sure you can address all of those issues and meet those deadlines.
Given the divided legislature, the likelihood that the legislature is going to do this as opposed to the courts is, in my mind, slim to none. They will not agree on what those district boundaries should look like. There's no indication that they're going to.
Not if you have a Republican, yeah.
Even when you had a legislature that was both parties.
Parties, they still.
It ended up in court.
They still had a hard time.
So and
this is going to come out of the court system, and then that delays the timelines, and we could all be under a significant
Under the
pressure.
gun. So I find this just very interesting, as you can tell. But I think I just learned something, and you said it a little while ago. I guess I never thought about it, but there's some counties that have 7 county commissioners.
Yes, they do.
So when
100,000 population is the threshold for that.
Then you are automatically obligated to go to 2 more commissioners?
No, then you can choose if
Oh.
you want to have 7 or 5.
Oh, no kidding.
Yep.
Okay. Wow.
So the threshold of population is 100,000 as to whether or not you want to continue to have 5 commissioners, which is the standard, or if you want to move to 7 commissioner districts.
Deb, if we're in compliance, do we have to go through all this?
If you are in compliance when everything is said and done, you don't have to go through all this. I don't want to hold out hope that you're going to be in compliance because I think there will be adjustments to legislative lines, and I think that there will be adjustments to population shifts that will cause you to be imbalanced in at least one of your districts, if not more.
So if we're imbalanced in one, then...
If you're imbalanced in one, you're imbalanced in all of them, and you have to redistrict. If all 5 of your districts stay within the same precinct boundaries and stay within that 10% threshold, you don't have to redistrict. But if that's not the case, if even one district is out of balance, then we have to redistrict the whole county.
And yes, and. The last time we did it, we impacted 3 commissioner
Correct.
districts. We did not impact 2. And so, yes, you have to redistrict, but it does not necessarily mean you have to impact all the commissioner districts. You have to rebalance.
Exactly.
So we added something to you, we added and took something from you, and we added to you.
No, we didn't. By the time the city of Brainerd got through, I was back in compliance.
She was back in
And we
compliance.
left me alone.
Yep, we only did 50 Lakes and Manhattan Beach
Then we
were
only
the
did
only
the
2 precincts. We actually impacted only 2 precincts. 50 Lakes and Manhattan Beach went from District 2 to District 5. And that put the whole county back into balance.
The likelihood that we have, I think we're going to experience different growth in different districts. You typically do. How much?
I think the bigger thing will be where if those legislative districts stay like they do, currently we have 1 Senate district and 2 House legislative districts. The census before that, we had 2 Senate districts and 4 House districts. That's the part that really kind of determines where some of those lines ends up being, and then that's how we start looking at putting those pieces into play.
And courts will typically make the least changes they can to put in a new redistricting
Correct.
plan.
They're not going to gerrymander it
They're
like
not.
They're not going to, no.
They just look at it and say, here's the map that exists today. Where are the things that I need to change?
Yep.
And they will just move individual things. So it is, frankly, when the courts do it, it's a little more stable. It can be, but that's no guarantee either.
We just end up with a little bit more rushed for time when we have the court situation that's in play. The one thing that is, and part of why you have to have the public hearing is by law, any registered voter, eligible voter in the county can contest the redistricting plan. They can either contest it if you don't do a plan, they can contest that. If you don't do it timely, they can contest that. And if they don't agree with the plan, they can contest that. That is a process that happens in district court. And the real crappy thing about that is it is a very short window of what would be occurring in that particular instance there.
A week. Wow.
If we do our work correctly, there's no reason that anybody would have to contest what the plan is. So we've never had that situation, but just need to be aware of it. Once the plan is adopted, we provide notice to the Secretary of State, to all the cities and the townships, and to the voters who have been affected. Every voter who has a change in their legislative district, their commissioner district, their polling location, their city precinct, they have to receive notice from our office that here's what your new information is. And we have to send that out. Typically, it's a special mailing that's done via like a postcard situation. Now, what you really want to know is who's got to run again.
Who's got what?
Who's going to have to run again?
Not me.
So here's what we know for a fact. If your 4-year term is up, you're up for election. So 2, 3, and 4, regardless if any changes happen in your precincts, you're up for election. End of your term. In districts 1 and 5, if the change is greater than 5% rule, you would have to stand for election again in 2022. And what the 5% rule is, taking that same average population, so if we look at District 1 again, we have 12,771 as our average population. The threshold now is only 5% rather than 10%, so that's 639 citizens, 639 people. Pre-redistricting, District 1 is going to have a population of, let's say, 12,299. After we draw all the maps and we end up moving things around, we decide, and I don't have the map changed colors, but for just sake of argument, let's say we end up having to move Bay Lake Township into District 1 and Oak Lawn Township into District 3. Let's say that's the change that we're going to make. What that ends up doing is giving a post-redistricted population of 12,567. The other thing that has to be looked at is the population shift. You shifted out the ones from Oak Lawn, 456, and you shifted in the ones from Bay Lake, 320. Those two numbers, population shift in and out, is what determines our threshold. So when we make that shift, it's 776 voters were shifted in or out of the district. The threshold is only 639. So because we had 776 voters impacted, 639 is our threshold, District 1 would have to stand for election in this scenario. So that's what's going to determine, and like Tim said, this is why when we looked at the district shifts that we did in the last census, by moving 50 Lakes and Manhattan Beach from District 2 to District 5, put everybody in balance, made everybody meet the 5% rule, nobody who was not up for election at that point had to run for re-election.
We just kept doing what we were doing.
We were doing those different shifts. We were looking at what that ended up being. Because it's not just, even though in this scenario, District 1 was within the 10% threshold, you only had an increase of population of whatever it ended up being, a couple of thousand or so. You only had a small increase, and you were within that 10% threshold of the average population. You were outside the 5% shift, so you have to take into consideration not just the net population growth or change, but also who's been affected by moving in and out.
I think you're trying to scare me by...
I'm not trying to scare you.
And I thought maybe you were doing a clawback because you were going like this.
I've already said I can't talk if I don't move my hands. The words don't come out of my mouth. So that's the scenario if you would have to rerun again, which is why we are going to be looking at multiple different scenarios for you to choose from. The next steps are basically, we expect to see some materials coming from the Secretary of State's office. Within probably the next couple of months, we'll be getting a redistricting guide. We'll have some self-paced training that we'll be required to go through. We will start to engage with our cities and townships to have that conversation so they all know where their time frame is, to make sure everybody is moving this bus along at the right pace. Our GIS staff is already engaged in this process. They'll be working with getting the census data at the tract and block level when we get to that point. And then once we get the release of that data in September, that will give us the first blush of, are we thinking there's any changes that we're going to have to make? I use the word working group very loosely, only from the standpoint that I'm not the one who comes up with the plans. We'll use the administrator, we'll use GIS staff, we'll use my office staff. We'll all work together to present a number of different plans to you that meet all the criteria of what needs to happen if you do need to do some redistricting. And then we'll give you those scenarios and you can choose which direction you want to move forward in adopting your plan. And the expectation there is we're probably looking late March, early April before we have information that would be coming back to the board for that purpose. The other thing I just want to kind of touch on really briefly is it's not free and it's not cheap to do redistricting. We don't need to have any kind of special software or anything. We utilize our GIS technologies and expertise there, so we are perfectly set in that particular realm. But we are required by law to publish the maps, the plans, the descriptions, all that piece. And I went back and looked at 2012, what it cost us, and it was just under $10,000 to publish the redistricting costs at that point in time. Additionally, we have to send notice to any of those voters who are impacted, and that was just over $3,000 that we made notice of in 2012. So we're figuring 3 to 5, depending on what those changes would be. So we are probably looking somewhere in that $12,000 to $17,000 estimate of what it will cost. There is a statute that allows you to levy a special levy of $1 per capita to assist with redistricting costs. That really is only necessary if we were under levy limits, which is why that language is there. We're not in that type of a situation, so we don't need to have any kind of special authority for that. But we will be increasing our publishing budget and our communication budget to the voters in our election budget for 2022. So we are keeping that in mind when we are looking at those costs there. What other questions do you have? I know that it really didn't give you any specific detail, but it's the information that we have right now, and hopefully by late September, early October, we'll have those first numbers that we can actually start to look at things.
It's coming.
It's an awfully tight timeline.
It is a very tight timeline, yes.
So,
But I don't want you to be worried and losing sleep.
I'm gonna go take a nap right now.
So,
thank you, Debbie. That's a pretty extensive explanation
Wow.
of
Wow.
what's going to happen.
yes.
That's the voodoo that we do.
More to come. Thank you.
All right.
With that, I think we're done.
I'll take care of the towel dispenser, by the way,
Yes.
too.
Yes, would you take care of the telephone?
We're